Breaking right now at 10 streets in one of Atlanta's busiest areas are shut down tonight as hundreds of people march the streets near Lenox Mall, at one point sitting down in the middle of Peachtree Road.
Food Street, our street! Food Street, our street!
And while we have not seen the demonstration tonight turn violent, our cameras did capture officers arresting about 10 people tonight.
And within the last 30 minutes, we saw the protesters arrive at the governor's mansion on West Paces Ferry, not very far from Peachtree. Our Sky Tracker is live over the scene right now. You can see the huge crowd of people and also the huge cadre of police cruisers there, blue lights flashing. It has been a very busy night so far in Atlanta. Tonight we have team coverage of the protests, what the protesters hope to achieve, and the impact on Metro Atlanta.
And we're going to begin right now. Our Caitlin Ross and John Sherrick both have coverage for us. They are at the governor's mansion right now. Let's start with Caitlin, who has been following the protesters and has witnessed several of those arrests tonight. Caitlin?
Jeff and Brenda, this is where the protest ended, but it's not even close to where it began. It started at the Lenox MARTA station at 7 o'clock, where hundreds of people gathered. They picked up people along the way. Now the crowd over 300 people. They're met with a very intense security presence. You can see across the street here dozens of police officers lined up, blue lights flashing. They're really making sure to keep these separate. Police officers are being very specific. You need to stay on the sidewalk. You need to stay out of the street. That's when those arrests happened earlier. They actually got on the megaphone, police officers did, and said, you need to be out of the streets. You're violating a city ordinance. If you don't move, you will be arrested. When the protesters did not move, they were put into handcuffs and carted away. They were all shouting their names and their birth dates as they were being arrested, asking people within that protest movement to come bail them out. So the protesters kind of split into a bunch of different sections, and now here, this is where they all ended back up. I've talked to some protesters who say they plan on camping out here overnight. They say they're not going to go home. They want to stay here all night long. Just a moment ago, they were chanting, "Wake up, Nathan." Now they're chanting, "Hands up, don't shoot." John Sherrick has also been following the protests all night long.
Caitlin, before we go to John very quickly, we understand that the Governor Deal, is not there at the mansion, that in fact he is on a trade mission trip in Germany. Do any of the protesters there have any information like that? Or do they know that he's likely not there?
Some of them have been asking us, do you know if the governor's home? Some of them were asking, do you think he'll come out and address the crowd? Do you think he's going to come out here and talk to us? So I don't know that they're specifically aware of his schedule right now. I think this stand is more, to show that they're outside, they're here, they're making their presence very well known. They keep chanting, if they don't sleep, we won't sleep. So it's really about making a show here outside of the governor's mansion.
Caitlin, Jeff here. My question for you is this. Do you see any leadership tonight? Ambassador Andrew Young over the weekend had been critical of the group, saying that there was not any kind of implied leadership. Are you seeing leaders tonight who are sort of shepherding all of these protesters?
Well, that's a really interesting question, Jeff, because there are actually two different Black Lives Matter movements that are here in attendance, and they do not agree with one another. They have very different ideas of what they want the movement to accomplish. They have very different ideas of why they're out here, what they want to do. So those two different leadership styles are kind of clashing. You saw it a couple different times. They almost were yelling at each other at one point, saying, we're going this way, no, we're going that way. So there are a couple different of ideas of what they think this movement is supposed to look like, what they think these protests are supposed to look like, and they're certainly at odds with each other. So throughout the night, you've seen kind of different leaderships coming into effect and different people standing up and saying, this is what we're going to do now, this is what it's going to be now, and then the other group would kind of have their idea of how it was going to go. So although they are all here together, they're all sitting together, at least parts of this movement are divided.
Caitlin, we saw earlier in your report that there have been some arrests, maybe 10 or 12 or so arrests, but what is the dynamic now between the police officers there and the protesters? Not just the Atlanta Police Department police officers who've been following them, but also there's a cadre of police officers there on the grounds of the governor's mansion. So what's the dynamic between the two sides?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, Brenda. Let me actually walk you down this line here. As you can see, people are very much peacefully. They're sitting down. They're not even really chanting at this point. You see this woman here holding up a peace sign. People are very peaceful. They actually have a band over here that's playing some music. They've been doing different chants. But then if you look across the street here, you're going to see the police officers who are also very peacefully standing across the street. It's really just kind of the two groups looking at each other. There really has not been any confrontations here at the governor's mansion, and I think that that's important to stress. There has not been those kind of standoffs that we've seen earlier, that we saw near Lenox Mall, that we saw when we were walking down Piedmont, and we saw those two groups really kind of clashing. This has been extremely peaceful. There's one officer that's kind of been walking the line, and he's been asking people as they step out into the street a little bit further, can you step back on the sidewalk? Can you please step back on the sidewalk? And at one point, one of the protesters actually asked him, hey, do you think the governor's going to come out here and talk? And I heard the police officer say to her, I don't know whether or not he's going to come out and talk, but it's your right to be out here. It's your right to protest out here. So it certainly is a very peaceful environment.
Caitlin, Mayor Reed said earlier today that the biggest difference between the protesters on Friday and what we have been seeing over the last 24 hours was no longer do you see families and you see mothers pushing baby carriages and fathers pushing as well, but you're seeing more of a sort of skilled protester. Is that sort of the vibe that you get tonight as you look around?
Yeah, that's a really good observation. They actually addressed that as they began the protest. At 7 o'clock when they met at the Lenox MARTA station, they said, look, this isn't the protest that you saw last night. This isn't the protest you saw Friday or Saturday. This is a very different group of people. And the word that you use is organized. That's exactly what they were. They had a very specific plan. And even they were kind of strategizing the arrests. They were asking, as they were all meeting in a group, they knew that they were going to leave some people there, that those people would likely be arrested. And they were asking for specific volunteers to come up. If you don't have a warrant, if you don't have a record, come up. If you want to volunteer to be arrested, we're going to leave you right here. The rest of the group will march on this way. So a professional protester, maybe more organized protester, they very much have a clear vision of what they want this to look like here tonight.
All right, Caitlin, we're going to continue to check back with you throughout this newscast to see how things are going there. We're going to let you take a breather here and go to our next crew, but thanks so much. You've given us quite a bit of insight as to what's going on right now in live time. So we'll check back with you in just a few minutes.
All right, let's check in now with John Schierick.
We're going to go to our Caitlin Ross, who has been following the protesters since the march started gathering at the Lenox MARTA station this evening about 7 o'clock. We're going into now, it's been more than 3 hours, going into the 4th hour, and it sounds like they are prepared to be there into the night, they say. Caitlin?
Brenda, they say they're not leaving at this point. They are prepared to stay overnight. We actually just heard one of the leaders of this movement saying he wants water, he wants some food, he wants additional people to come out here to kind of relieve the protesters so they can protest in shifts. He says they plan to stay out here until Mayor Kasim Reed comes out to the governor's mansion and addresses them in person. Now, this protest has really grown. When we first saw this, it was maybe 100 people. Now, as I walk you down the line here, you can see there are more than 300, maybe even 400 people protesting. A lot of them really just very peacefully sitting on the sidewalk. One woman was flashing the peace sign to the police officers as they came over here. And so you can hear there, Mayor Reed, bring him out. That's what they're chanting right now. They said they really want the mayor to come out here to address them in person. They said we want a sit-down meeting with him. We want to address him in person. And that's what they're saying. They're not going to leave until the mayor comes out and talks to them. They had been asking for the governor earlier, saying, wake up, Nathan, but we were able to find out that he's actually not here right now. So now they're saying they want to talk to Kasim Reed. Now they're chanting no justice, no peace. You hear a lot of these different chants throughout the night. A lot of people talking about a lot of different things. You can see a lot of them have all sorts of different signs out there. A lot of people have megaphones. They're talking loudly, kind of talking about I'm sorry about the profanity there during a protest. Difficult to control that, but you can see all of their different signs there. All of them. This one here says Atlanta is ready. They're wearing the Black Lives Matter stickers over their mouths. And actually, I just spoke to the woman who is selling these Black Lives Matter stickers. She gave me 2 of them, and an interesting point here is she told me that some of the police officers actually bought these stickers. She's using the money, all of the profits from these stickers, to bail people out of jail who were arrested. So far, only about 10 people were arrested that we saw, but right now there are 2 very clear lines here, police line across the street, protesters over here, and they're being very respectful of each other, but making it very clear that if they cross that line, there will be more arrests. You see a lot of those officers walking around with the flex cuffs. They're on the ready right now, but really just asking people to go back to the protest line, to stay on this side of the sidewalk, and they really have respected that. Now, my coworker John Schierick was actually with the protesters earlier this evening, and John, you were marching with a whole different group of people there.
The assemblage began at Lenox Square Mall at around 7 o'clock, and they were able to shut down one of the busiest intersections in all of Atlanta, as they have been at Peachtree Street at the entrance of Lenox Square Mall to begin it early this evening.
We have live team coverage of the protest tonight, beginning with our Caitlin Ross, who has been with the protesters all evening long. She spoke with organizers this evening as well. Caitlin, what are they hoping to achieve with all of this, and how long are they prepared to be there tonight?
Well, Brenda, they say they're going to stay out here all night until Mayor Kasim Reed comes out and addresses them himself. Right now, they're asking him to come down here to the governor's mansion, talk to the people who have been waiting outside for hours here. The police have actually closed down the street, so you can no longer get to and from the governor's mansion. The street is closed, so now they're saying they're not able to get food, they're not able to get water. They're asking people to come bring them food and water. They're asking additional protesters to come down, relieve them so they can protest in shifts. And they've been out here for about an hour at the governor's mansion, really just kind of peacefully sitting here on the sidewalk, a number of them chanting, some singing, some flashing peace signs, but they're all asking for the same thing, for Mayor Kasim Reed to come out and address them. Now, for the most part, haven't seen any arrests at the governor's mansion, but we did see about 10 to 12 arrests earlier today. That was when we were actually walking down Piedmont. The officers were saying to them, you have to get off the sidewalk, you have to get back into the sidewalk, you're violating a city ordinance, you need to get back on the sidewalk. And then when those protesters did not get back on the sidewalk, about 10 of them were arrested. Earlier in the evening, they were actually asking for volunteers. If you don't have a record, if you don't have a felony, why don't you go ahead and volunteer to be the person who's arrested so you don't get in that much trouble. As people were arrested, they were actually screaming their name, birth date, so people could come bail them out. A number of people out here at the governor's mansion have started funds asking, can you donate anything to help bail the people who got arrested out of jail? And they say here, they're prepared to stay here all night. They're prepared to be arrested. They're saying that they're going to stay here until Mayor Kasim Reed comes out and addresses them. They say it's important to them that people hear why they're here, that people understand what they're doing, and that people appreciate that the effort that they have. You can hear right here, this is a list of demands they say they have.
Not leaving until we talk to Mayor Kasim Reed and Chief George Turner. We want to talk solutions. We're not here for fun. We're not here for fun. So bring them out here and everybody can go to sleep. Bring them out here, we can talk solutions and everybody can go to sleep. So what we're going to need? We're going to need some water. We're going to need some food. We're going to need some people, because we're going to have to rest, right? We're going to need a speaker, because we're going to have to turn up.
So it's not clear at this point, though, how they're going to accomplish that, because the police have blocked off the roads, both sections. They're not allowing people in or out. And you can see here, they're now bringing in the prisoner transport vans. They brought in a big mobile operations unit. So it looks like they are starting to get ready to do something else. This is what we saw just before the arrests on Piedmont. We saw the police officers putting on their gloves. We saw them telling people to back up. So it looks like they could be getting ready to do something here. Jeff and Brenda, we're monitoring monitoring this situation very closely, and we'll be here as long as the protesters are.
Caitlin, I have a question for you. Over the weekend, Ambassador Andrew Young had been highly critical of the group over the weekend and their protests, saying that there seemed to be no real purpose. Do you sense any leadership tonight? Is anyone shepherding these protesters in terms of what they are trying to accomplish on this Monday night?
Yeah, Jeff, there's a really clear division here. There are two different groups of people, both claiming to be the leadership of Black Lives Matter, and they have very different ideas of what it means to lead this movement. One of them says they want anarchy, they want arrests, they want to be in people's faces, they want to disrupt the peace. The other group says they want to do this peacefully. They don't want arrests, they don't want people being taken away in handcuffs. So it's really two very different ideas of what they're hoping to accomplish out here tonight, but all of them are still out here from both of those groups.
And Caitlin, on that note, I mean, Mayor Reed earlier today called for mutual respect from both sides. So what is the dynamic tonight between police officers, the Georgia State Patrol, and the protesters tonight? And what about the noise ordinance this evening, which went into effect at 10 o'clock? As I've noted, it's a residential area there. So, you know, are they going to try to enforce that or let that go?
Well, just until a few minutes ago, they actually had a really loud drum circle going, and just about 5 minutes ago, they shut that down. So that could be part of the noise ordinance. Like you said, that went into effect at 10 o'clock. It's 11 o'clock, and they're still chanting very loudly, but they're not actually doing the drum circle anymore. They're just kind of chanting at this point, really shouting. And they say they're going to be here all night doing those same chants.
And very quickly, the dynamic between police officers and the protesters, is it still pretty healthy, pretty good?
Very peaceful at this point, Brenda. They're really staying to their respective sides of the street. There's one GSP officer who's kind of been patrolling back and forth and asking people very nicely, hey, can you get back on the sidewalk? Can you get back on the sidewalk? There have been no arrests here at the governor's mansion, and the organizers of this protest have made it very clear. You need to stay back on the sidewalk. Even when somebody's foot kind of goes over the curb, they say, hey, you need to step back, you need to step back, you need to stay on the sidewalk. So they really are observing those laws, making sure that they pay attention to what police officers are saying. And like I said, so far, no arrests here at the governor's mansion.
All right, Caitlin, thanks very much. Of course, we'll come back to you before this newscast is over. Thanks, Caitlin.
They've been inside this mobile command unit for at least 40 minutes now. They walked up in here. They're meeting with the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement. First, we saw Police Chief Turner. When he came, he was very quiet about it. He just kind of walked up around the back, asked to speak with the leadership. They came over. He spoke with them quickly, and then they went inside this mobile command unit. After that, about 20 minutes later, we saw Mayor Kasim Reed pull up. He didn't speak to anybody who was outside here. He just went straight around into the mobile command unit. Now they've been meeting with at least two people who are in the leadership of the Black Lives Matter movement here in Atlanta inside that mobile command unit. So a bunch of protesters, though, are still outside. They've been chanting this whole time. They've been talking this whole time. They're asking for food, medicine, and water because the police officers have quieted both sides of the street so they can't get through. So at this point, they're waiting. They're wanting to see exactly what's going to happen with this meeting. This is what they've been asking for hours. They were sitting outside the governor's mansion chanting and chanting. First, they were asking for Governor Nathan Deal, but once it was passed along that he was out of the country, they started asking for Mayor Kasim Reed. They were saying, come out with us, talk to us. We want to address you. We want to have a meeting with you. And about an hour and a half later, both the police chief and Mayor Kasim Reed showed up. So a lot of people on Twitter are saying this is a huge victory. They asked for something and they got it. Now the police chief and the mayor both inside having a meeting with them. We don't know exactly what the contents of that meeting is going to be. My coworker John Schierick was actually talking up close with Police Chief Turner, and I know you were able to ask him a question, John. So was he able to answer you in terms of what they were going to talk about? At this point, they're saying they're still going to stay out here all night. They're saying that they're going to be out here. They want to stay out here all night. They're actually asking for food, medicine, and water, saying that they want the police to open the roads, allowing more water, more food, more protesters to get back in. When they were talking about staying here all night, they were saying that they were going to need to take shifts because this protest started at 7 o'clock at night and they wanted people to be able to come in and out. At this point, the road is blocked off at Habersham. People are free to leave, but they're not able to come back inside after they leave. So the protesters are asking for them to reopen that road so people can take turns, come back in and out. At this point, they're still saying they're going to be here all night. The crowd has shrunk considerably, though. When we first were at the MARTA station at 7 o'clock, there were about 100 people. It was a small crowd. As they walked through the streets, though, they really picked up a lot more people. By the time we got to the governor's mansion, there were at least 400 people here covering the sidewalks, and they were staying on the sidewalks. It was a very peaceful atmosphere between police officers and protesters. Police officers very politely asking them when they stepped off the sidewalk, please go back to the sidewalk. There were no arrests here at the governor's mansion. There were a lot of loud chants. There was singing. A lot of people were using drums, so it was definitely very noisy, but it was very peaceful. It was peaceful the entire time that they were here. So what they had really been asking for, they got at this point. They got Mayor Kasim Reed, they got Police Chief Turner to show up, to have a meeting with them. They're there in that mobile command unit at this point. They're having that meeting. We're not entirely sure what they're talking about, but what they wanted was a sit-down meeting. They wanted a chance to address the mayor, to address the police chief. And I mean, at 11:30 at night, the Atlanta police chief and the Atlanta mayor both showed up to be able to talk to them. So it's a pretty incredible turn of events here in Atlanta. This is the first time we've really seen something of this magnitude, the police chief, the mayor coming out and meeting with protesters. So this is a pretty big deal here, Brenda.
Well, this has been going on now for about 5 hours. It began with a much smaller group at Lenox Square Mall, and then it really has grown as the hours have progressed, and the crowds have grown larger, obviously, at the governor's mansion. The Black Lives Matters leaders have asked for the mayor and they have asked for the police chief, but they have not said why they want to talk to them and how things have changed, what their expectation is, what their demands are, and what their purpose serves after 12 o'clock tonight. What is it they are seeking from the mayor, what they are seeking from the police chief? That we do not know. We have not had a hint of that tonight.
We're going to try to stay on the air until we see Mayor Kasim Reed and Chief George Turner emerge from that mobile command unit. That is where they're engaged in discussion right now with the leaders of the protest. Caitlin, if you can still hear us, tell us a little bit more about the two groups that you say are being represented there among the protesters. You say there are two decidedly different groups there with different, at least different strategies about how to go about achieving their goals. Can you talk to us some about that?
Well, yeah, I'm actually going to see if I can bring in the leader of the Greater Atlanta Black Lives Matter movement right now, because he has a little bit of a different idea of how he hopes to achieve this. And yeah, Sir Major, we talked earlier about what you hope to achieve here tonight. Do you feel like by bringing the police chief and by bringing the mayor out, you've gotten what you came here for?
No, the mayor and the chief police have not come talk to the people, and so that's what they need to do, right? One thing that they're doing is they're blocking food, medicine, and water, right? So we can't even get that to be able to be self-sufficient. We have people with medical issues. We got children out here, and so our law enforcement are sworn to protect us, and our chief of police, that's the least that they can do, is allow us to have food, medicine, and the water, right? And so we're out here, obviously, because of these senseless killings that's taking place here in our backyard. At Piedmont Park, where the officer shot the 22-year-old black male, and the officer was fired today. So we're here to send our message to the governor's door that we would not stand for this, and it will not be tolerated by the people.
And now when we were talking earlier, we were kind of talking about two different groups of people who are coming together in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you feel like your message is united when you're asking the police chief and asking the mayor for something specific here?
I think that we're all on the same page in terms of we want people to stop killing us. We want the law enforcement to treat us fairly. We want them to treat us like humans, right? Black Lives Matter. And we want, for these officers or anyone out here that believes that all lives matter, show us that. Show us that. You guys have the opportunity in front of all these cameras to show us that all lives matter.
And if you had the opportunity to be in there in this mobile command unit at this point, what would you be saying to the police chief? What would you be saying to the mayor?
Well, again, the first thing I would say is these folks need to eat. That's the first thing. Let's talk about that. People need access to the medicine. So those are the first conversations that we need to have. Second of all, I think there needs to be a citywide town hall meeting where folks can really get their feelings and their emotions out because they feel betrayed by law enforcement. Now, of course, all law enforcement isn't bad, but certainly all law enforcement isn't good. And so the ones, the law enforcement officers that are out here that know this to be true, that hide behind the thin blue line, if they don't speak out on these injustices, their silence is endorsement to the violence. And so we need our law enforcement, the good ones, to speak out.
And in terms of what they can do tonight, in terms of what the mayor and the police chief could do tonight, you know, you had been asking them to come out here. They did come out here. Is that a win to you?
Well, they came out, and yes, it's a stepping stone. It's an advancement. However, what law enforcement can do for us right now is, first of all, this stance that they have, that's threatening. That can be considered threatening. So we would like our law enforcement to back out, back where they were originally, because they weren't out here all night over on this side. So they back up, allow us to bring food and water. We'll clean up our mess afterwards. You know, just let us be able to protest and exercise our constitutional rights.
How long do you plan on staying here tonight?
A lot of people are asking that question, and we're going to stand out here as long as it takes. So if that means till 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, so be it. We're going to be here.
You say as long as it takes. As long as what takes? What's the end goal here today?
The end goal right now is to send a message to the world, right, and to send a message to our local justice system and our local law enforcement that you cannot kill us like this. We're tired of being killed and slaughtered throughout the streets like barbaric animals, right? And so we had the young man that was killed by an Atlanta police officer who was fired today. Let's talk about that, because the news isn't dwelling on that, right? And so an Atlanta police officer was fired today because he used excessive force and he killed a black man. Now, because he was fired, where's the criminal indictment at? Where's the charges at? We want this officer indicted on these charges.
Well, I will say that we did cover it extensively, and GBI is investigating, so it's certainly something that is being looked into. Tonight, though, do you think that by having the chief and the mayor out here, your message was heard?
I definitely think so. I think that the chief and the mayor had no choice but to be out here. It was so much pressure from the news media, from the citizens who they're sworn to protect. They had no choice but to be out here.
What happens tomorrow?
Tomorrow, you'll see tomorrow.
Do you think that these protests in Atlanta will continue?
They will definitely continue until the people get what they want. I'm just a messenger for the people that I represent.
All right, thank you very much. Jeff and Brenda, you heard very much what this leader of the Black Lives Movement had to say. This was the leader of the Greater Atlanta Black Lives Matter chapter. They do draw a distinction between the Atlanta chapter and the Greater Atlanta chapter. So that is Sir Major, who is with the Greater Atlanta Black Lives Matter movement.
I'm still very confused, I have to say, Caitlin. I am very confused as to what the purpose would be to stay there all night now that they have made a demand and they've gotten the response from the mayor and the police chief. They're both there. They're both talking to the activists. So what more do they want, and what would be the purpose of staying even longer once the mayor and the police chief emerge from that mobile command unit?
I think the other